Okay, so today we're going to solve a quadratic equation by extracting the square roots. We're going to first solve this equation here, this quadratic, by factoring. So when we factor x squared minus 9, it's just difference of squares, and it factors to x plus 3 and x minus 3. And you just, our x times x is x squared. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. And then this is plus 3x minus 3x. And those cancel. So therefore, it does equal to x squared minus 9. And then we set each factor equal to 0. And then solve. So this is x is equal to minus 3. This is x is equal to 3. And we can write x is equal to plus or minus 3. Okay, so just keep in mind that, remember when we have a quadratic power a degree 2, two possible factors, so two answers, two solutions, unless they were repeated roots, repeated factors. Okay, so now our next problem, same problem. Okay, so we are going to now solve the same problem by taking the square root of both sides. So we're going to, but we don't just do it right off the bat. You first isolate x squared. So we add 9 to both sides, so we get x squared equals 9. And then we could take the square root of both sides. And if you remember, this is actually, the square root of x squared is actually the definition of absolute value of x. Square root of 9 is 3. So to solve absolute value of x, inside what solves it, I can plug in x equals 3, and that's a true statement, or x is equal to negative 3, and that's a true statement. So we get x is equal to plus or minus 3. Of course, we're going to get the same answer, okay? So we can do this in general. In general, we have x squared equals d, some number d. It has two solutions. Basically, when we take the square root of both sides, we just know this is plus or minus the square root of d. Okay, we don't know what d is, so that's just the answer. So it has two solutions, plus square root of d, minus square root of d. Basically, when you're pulling out the x, it's an absolute value, and it has two solutions, a plus and a minus that it could be. So we can remember that, and that's called extracting the square root. So we're going to solve this quadratic by extracting the root. We'll add 30 to both sides. We want to isolate the x squared. Take the square root of both sides. Again, you can, if you want to, say this is the absolute value of x, which is the square root of 6. But when you pull that out, you have to say it's plus or minus the square root of 6. Okay, square root of 6 is not a perfect square root. It's not a perfect square, sorry. Okay, so 6 is not a perfect square, so it just stays inside unless you can simplify it. And like I said, it has two answers. Let's do another one. So again, here we're going to solve the square, okay? That's our first step. So we solve x minus 2 squared is equal to negative 4. Subtract 4 from both sides. And this is a perfect squared, so I'm going to just take the square root of both sides. And the square root of negative 4 is 2i, okay? If you want to skip the part, well, about the absolute value, we can just put a plus or minus and pull that out. So x minus 2, because the square and the square root cancel, but again, because it was the definition of absolute value, you have to put a plus or minus. Again, it's a quadratic. This is a quadratic. So 2 solutions, unless of course you have a repeated root. So now we isolate x. We're not done. So if I add 2 to this side, I can add 2 to this side. That cancels. And I get x is equal to, I like the 2 being in front, 2 plus or minus 2i. And that's 2 solutions, okay? If you want to write them out, it's x equals 2 plus 2i and 2 minus 2i. Of course, you have to leave it like that because it is a complex number. So we have just opened up the opportunity to solve more quadratics. Okay, so this next problem we're going to solve, it is a 4th degree polynomial, so maybe there's 4 answers, we'll look out for that, but it is a trinomial, and so a trinomial can be factored into 2 binomials. Let's see if this can be factored first. So since this is x to the 4th, what times what is x to the 4th? How about x squared times x squared equals x to the 4th? And then we look at our last term here, minus 6. How about 3 and 2? But one's a plus, one's a minus. The difference is 1, so that's not going to work. But it is negative, so maybe 6, well, that was 6, 6 and 1. And that works because that's minus 6x squared and plus x squared. Again, I also knew, because my middle term is x squared, since this is x squared, it has to add to be x squared, so these had to be x squared. They do add and subtract to be x squared. So that actually works, that my middle term is negative 5x squared, and negative 6 times 1 is negative 6. Okay, but I'm not done, because I've just factored. I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. And isolate. Now we can extract the root. So x squared is equal to 6. Over here, doing it simultaneously, x squared equals negative 1. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Take the square root of both sides. And when I extract this, x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 6. This x is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 1 is I. 1, 2, 3, 4 answers. 4th degree polynomial. It sounds like we did it correct. Okay, so let's solve this quadratic. Again, we don't want to FOIL it out because we're extracting the root here. So I'm going to isolate my squared. This is my squared, the whole square term. So I'm going to add 50 to both sides. So that 50 will cancel and move over to the right. Now we need to isolate the squared term completely, which means we don't want that 2 there. So what I need to do is I need to divide by 2 to get rid of it, and so I divide both sides by 2, and that cancels there. And that's 25. And now I could extract the root. This becomes x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 25 is 5. So again, I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. It becomes a negative 3 plus or minus 5. So I can put it in the front. Subtract 3, I subtract 3, but the negative 3 can be put in the front. It just looks better. Now, usually I stop there, but if we break this down to 2 solutions, minus 3 plus 5 is one solution, and minus 3 minus 5 is the other, we're able to go further with this. So x is equal to 2 and negative 8. So that's how you extract the root. The next video will play off of this method of extracting the root and show you how to complete this square. Okay, be sure to watch it.